Hey everyone, it's been over 2 minutes and I haven't been raped yet, but I can feel you looking at me. Hi, I'm Davison, a Canadian men's rights activist. I want to talk today about a bit of an epiphany I had when in a discussion with John the Other about a phrase, the male gaze. You'll hear this coming out of feminists, and they talk about the male gaze as if it's some sort of a physical assault upon women. It's often used in conjuncture with this idea that catcalling is some sort of a physical assault. Never made sense to me because, to be quite honest, if I get some sort of a response from people in public, they laugh at a joke I've made or they give me some sort of an appreciative look, it's like, well, glad you're enjoying me. Because essentially when you walk out the door, you are on display, and it's part of engaging with the people around you. We all have senses, we all receive information through those senses, and it's part of our interaction that's an enjoyable part of being human. But for feminists, this simple level of interaction is somehow an assault on them, and specifically, as we're talking about today, the act of being viewed, right? So it didn't make sense to me when I heard this phrase, the male gaze, because they're talking as if they're assaulted by a gaze. And in grade school, I recall seeing a picture of an eyeball. It was sort of a scientific style drawing. The most informative ones are the scientific drawings where they tell you what the parts of the eye are and they try to explain how they function. Now, you don't have to go to high school and take an advanced science course in order to pick up this information. It's basically just they show you these parts and they explain how rays of light are reflected and how they are absorbed by the eyeball, and the information is basically a bunch of data conveyed to your brain, and your brain then translates it into an image. It's quite phenomenal. You don't have to take an advanced science course to get a general idea of how the eyeball works. Now, I'd say about 2 years ago, I ended up on the internet engaged in a debate, I guess you could call it. It wasn't much of a debate, with a middle-aged woman who thought that her father had written this awesome book, Solving the Problems of World Peace, and solutions for political arrangements in society that would prevent people from ever getting into conflict with each other or, showing any acts of aggression. And she was convinced that her father had, been basically a messenger from God, the next Jesus Christ, whatever, and that all that was required was for people to read this book and to agree with him. One of the things, I don't want to get into the details of it because it's just so absurd, and I spent months and months and months engaging in this argument, and she'd been arguing with people on this forum for years. But one of the things that he was revealing in this book was that eyes were not a sight organ, and part of the premise of that was that eyeballs did this thing, which was projecting some sort of a ray of vision out into the world in order to meet the objects around it and then tell you what is there, right? So your vision was actually an interaction with the world around you. Instead of just receiving the information, your eyeballs projected some sort of a ray, not Superman, like you can see through things. It projects a ray so that you can actually contact these things with your vision and then see what it is that's there. So it was so absurd. I did a little bit of research to figure out how somebody could believe this, and I came across something called emission theory. Emission theory is an old theory about how eyes worked, and it was accepted at the time for quite a while, and interestingly, a Muslim debunked that theory and came up with a more accurate version, what we believe to be a more accurate version of how eyeballs actually work. And the generally accepted theory today by anybody with any scientific or apparently grade school education can say that your eyes actually receive information. They do not project to gain the information. So prior to this understanding, there was a thing called emission theory, and it sounds ridiculous to us now, you would think, but and here's a little bit of a trigger warning for those who get upset by the concept that the people surrounding them in the world are really, really stupid. You may be triggered by this information. They asked a bunch of college students, after giving them a lecture explaining a little bit about how vision worked, they had them fill out a questionnaire, and it turns out that 50% of college students in this study actually believed in emission theory. Now, that's not to say that they were taught emission theory and they chose that over other theories, but their answers to the questions implied that their beliefs about eyes and how vision worked was consistent with emission theory. That 50% of college students, so these are people smart enough to get accepted to a college, actually believed that your eyes project some sort of a sight ray that brings, that sends information to your brain. I can't 100% guarantee whether they think that the information is gleaned by your brain at the point where your eyeballs projected vision contacts the object, or whether they think you have to go out, contact the object, and bring the information back. But of course, we got the speed of light, so everything is happening in milliseconds, right? 50% of college students. Now I'm going to do a little bit of bad math and say 50% of the population are women. From a lot of the women I talked to, I believe that they're making up a large percentage of the people who still believe this theory to be true. And we're going to set that aside because that's bad math, right? It's just 50% of educated people. So if you were to take the broad population and include uneducated people, we're potentially going above 50%, okay? Okay, they were only undergraduates. Maybe by the time they actually get a full degree, maybe they're a little bit more intelligent or more enlightened. But we're talking about information that can be obtained in grade school. So my hopes aren't high here. So 50% of the people still have this concept that your eyeballs are actively projecting something into the world when you go about looking at things. Now, I made this connection today because the phrase the male gaze came up and I was like, oh my God, do these feminists actually think when a man looks at them that they're being physically assaulted? Because that's how they talk about it, right? And and I just laughed it off before, thinking, it's just feminists saying stupid things again and trying to make a case for them to get more money and more funding or whatever, because they walk out into the world and it's rape, right? But I, after today, now believe that when somebody uses the phrase the male gaze, they're one of that bottom feeder percentage of the population who actually think when a man looks at them, their eyeballs have assaulted them. Now I'm going to cut them a little bit of slack because there's common phrases like, he had a piercing gaze, that reinforce this idea that when somebody looks at you, something physical has happened. But I'm one of those people who likes to treat women equally, and I expect them to be intelligent adult human beings with a brain that functions properly. So I'm not going to let them get away with this phrase anymore. When somebody says to you that they've been assaulted by or that they feel threatened by the male gaze, I suggest that you should now treat them as one of that really idiotic percentage of the population who thinks that somebody's gaze is actually a physical projection from their body into your personal space. So that's the debunking of the male gaze, as I see it. And, feminists will probably be like, oh, that's unfair, that's not what we mean blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter what they mean. The only thing that actually makes sense is to assume that anybody using the phrase, the male gaze, is one of that ridiculous portion of the population who actually believes in emission theory. Links are below. And now, I don't know, I gotta come up with the rape joke of the week. Given the topic, making it up on the fly. A cop arrives at the scene of a crime. He finds a woman cowering in the corner, and he says, it's okay, you're safe. Please explain to me what's happened to you. She's like, I feel so violated. I could feel it just piercing me from every direction. He's like, what happened? He looked at me. The cop is extremely concerned. When you say he looked at you, what do you mean? Did he look at you like this? Did he look at you like this? Or did he look at you like this?